Hello dear chess friends, today I would like to show you a 5 minutes blitz game I played today against a black player with rating 1422 and it was a queen's gambit accepted. So d4, d5, c4, d takes c. I continued with e4, occupying the center, and black responded with e6. What you sometimes see instead of e6 is b5. If that happens, you should do a flank attack by a4. Black protects with c6, a takes b, c takes b, and now you develop your knight to c3. Black protects the attacked pawn with bishop d7, and then you can advance your d-pawn to gain more influence in the center. But here it was e6 that was played instead of b5, so I captured the pawn on c4. Black now further develops his knight to f6 and I immediately pin it. Bishop moves to e7 and I develop my knight to c3. So now my bishop gets attacked through h6 and now I can decide whether I want to go back to h4 or simply take the knight, and that's what I did in this game, taking the knight. So obviously bishop takes bishop. And then I advanced my e-pawn with a tempo. Now the bishop needs to move and I have a bit more space in the center. Bishop moves back to e7 and now I was a little bit afraid of this nasty pin, so that's why I played a3. So castling for black and developing the second knight to f3, a6, and probably what black plans is something like b5. I also castle, and now first black develops his knight to c6. So anticipating the move b5, I retreat my bishop to a2, and that was also a good move. So black now moves his rook to b8, anticipating an open or semi-open b line. I do not agree, so I develop my rook to the c1 square because that's already a half open line for me. And now the b5 advance happens. In order to not make the b line an open line, I simply do b4, stopping the pawn on b5. Now the best move for black would have been to obviously immediately attack my pawn on b4 by advancing a6 to a5. Could not reasonably capture because this field is protected by the knight on c6, could capture a5. What he did is develop his bishop to b7. And now I have a very simple idea. The Queen's Gambit players amongst you will probably realize the theme, creating a battery, bishop b1, queen on either c2 or d3, and an easy checkmate on h7. So let's see how far I get with that idea. Black further develops his bishop to g5, attacking my rook. So now obviously I could move my rook to say c2, but then my battery would not work anymore. So I decided to not play this move, but rather continue with my battery idea, because obviously checkmate is stronger than a lost rook. Right, and as you can see here, checkmate is threatened. So rook black cannot capture my rook now, but it has to prevent the checkmate on h7, which he does by playing g6. So now my rook is in danger, and I move it to the d line, doubling up on the d line. So bishop a8, not sure I fully understand that move. Anyway, so now my knight moves further towards the king, my other knight, from c3 to e4, increasing the pressure to the bishop. And I guess probably what black should have done is retreating the bishop, for example, to e7. Instead, he moved his king to h7. So now I can take the bishop on g5 h takes g, and now I add more pressure on this pawn on g5. So black just advances the pawn, playing g4, attacking my knight on f3. And now what should I do? Probably the best move would have been advancing the knight to g5 with a check. And then, for example, king goes to g7, and then I could attack this not so well protected pawn on g4, hoping to open my f line, maybe doubling up on the f line and increasing pressure on f7. That would have been a nice idea, or even if he does not take, I could win this pawn here. So, but all this did not happen. So what happened instead is the following: knight jumps to d2, which obviously, as you can see, is a mistake. And now the evaluation is equal. And why is it a mistake? Because now this pawn no longer is sufficiently protected. So black can immediately take this pawn, leading now with +1 from a material point of view, and also threatening a queen exchange, which obviously I do not want now because I am back in material. So I find another nice place for my queen, and I spot g5, which is considered to be best move. Okay, it seems like I lose another pawn, and again black threatens a swap of queens. Obviously his queen is protected while mine is not, but also the pawn on g4 is unprotected. So in the end, with all this, I lost one pawn. So now we are pretty much equal. Luckily for me, now black plays a somewhat weak move. He probably wants to move his pieces closer to his open king to get some protection for the king. But yeah, moving the king, for example, to g7 would have been probably a better move. I also did not find the best move now because there was a double attack here on h4, attacking both the king and the knight, winning the knight. So instead, I wanted to gain some influence on the e line. So black again also did not see this threat here, so also dubious move. And now I can further bring in my knight closer to the action on the king side. And it was a discovered attack, so now he needs to move his queen again. This time he wants to still swap queens, attacking my queen from f5. So I do not want to swap queens, so I need to find a square where it does not happen. And basically I discovered, now I saw this double attack and was quite happy to win the knight. Nevertheless, as indicated here, obviously the much better move would have been this discovered check, winning the queen. So not spotted on my side, unfortunately. Good, so let's move to the real situation. So it was like that. I went with my queen to h4, and now king has to move to the g line. He moves to g7. Now I can capture the knight on e7. Also now moving the rook to the open, semi-open h line on h8. Not the best move. Taking the knight is not gaining immediately, let's say, because it's still sufficiently protected on my side. Nevertheless, it would reduce the pressure on the black king a little bit, and that's why this is considered to be the better move. So I took the knight, rook moved to h8, and now I bring in my knight, moving it to g5, which is again a discovered attack. So the queen is under fire. Obviously the bishop is protected, so the queen needs to move away. Where does she go? And there's another attack, because it's not only this discovered attack, now it's also this discovered attack, right? Because obviously this pawn is pinned, so it cannot help to protect this pawn. So this pawn is basically defended only once. But now with this move, knight to g5, this pawn is now attacked 2 times, because the rook and the knight both attack this pawn on e6. So black, also a bit under time trouble, moves with his queen to f6, still hoping for a queen swap. And now I basically brought my knight to e6 with a check. So the check prevents the queen to be taken. Also the pawn on f7 is pinned, so the only option, or one of the few options, or the best option for black, if he does not want to lose his queen, because if he moves his king away, obviously his queen will no longer be protected. So black realized that and took my knight with his queen. So, but now I can take his queen with my rook, and still the rook obviously cannot be captured because of the pin. So now the situation becomes really a bit difficult for black. So now trying to move my queen away, but now obviously what works now, and maybe pause the video if you need to. There's a winning move now for white, which I found luckily, is rook g6. So why is this good? Obviously black cannot take because the rook is protected. Also pawn cannot take because of the pin. So if no one can take, it means the king needs to move, and there's only one square where the king can move, and that is h7. And now there is checkmate, queen taking on f7, checkmate. I hope you liked this video. If so, please subscribe to my channel or give me a like. Thank you and goodbye.